The desperate call. The Valoran diplomatic shuttle limped toward Earth's orbital station, Harmony Point, its crystalline hull marred by weapons fire. Emergency beacons pulsed frantically, broadcasting distress signals across 17 communication bands. The station's defense grid locked onto the approaching vessel before recognition protocols triggered, diverting automated countermeasures at the last possible moment. Admiral Helena Chen stood motionless at the observation deck, her weathered face revealing nothing as she studied the damaged alien craft. 30 years of service in the United Earth Defense Force had taught her to keep her thoughts carefully guarded, even when surrounded only by her own staff. They said it was a diplomatic envoy. Lieutenant Ramirez murmured beside her. It was. Chen replied, her eyes fixed on a particularly devastating impact crater near the vessel's propulsion array. Note the escort configuration. The Valorans sent their High Counselor's personal transport. Station gravity fluctuated momentarily as docking procedures completed. Chen straightened her uniform, crisp despite the late hour, and turned sharply toward the reception chamber. Her footsteps echoed against metal flooring, unhurried despite the obvious urgency of the situation. When she arrived, representatives from the Galactic Concord were already gathered. A dozen species filled the chamber with a cacophony of movement, scent, and sound. The Meridian Ambassador's epidermis flashed distress patterns of deep purple and amber, while the silicon-based Corin delegation emitted low-frequency vibrations that made human teeth ache. High Counselor Fellows of the Valoran Alliance was the last to enter, flanked by medical drones that periodically applied regenerative compounds to his damaged carapace. 3 of his 4 limbs bore evidence of recent combat, wrapped in translucent bandages that pulsed with bioluminescent healing agents. His vocal translator appeared damaged, occasionally emitting bursts of untranslated Valoran, high-pitched tones that human xenolinguists classified as expressions of extreme distress. Admiral Chen, he began, his translator struggling to modulate his voice into human audible ranges. The scourge has broken through the Antares defensive line. The Concord's 7th Fleet is destroyed. A holographic display activated at the center of the conference table, showing star systems along the galactic arm. Red markers pulsed at 23 points, spreading outward in a pattern reminiscent of an aggressive infection. How many casualties? Chen asked, her expression professionally neutral. Thalos's primary ocular cluster rotated toward her, while his secondary visual organs continued monitoring the display. 23 billion souls on colonized worlds. 612 million military personnel. 78% of the combined Concord heavy fleet. The chamber fell silent. Even the normally voluble Corins ceased their anxious vibrations. You dismissed our military assessment during the last council meeting, Chen remarked evenly, calling up footage from a previous gathering where Concord representatives had politely but firmly rejected Earth's strategic analysis of the emerging scourge threat. The Galactic Concord acknowledges its error, Thelos said, performing the Valoran gesture of formal apology, pressing his undamaged limb against the conference table until it bent at an uncomfortable angle. The scourge adapts to our energy weaponry faster than we can develop countermeasures. They consume our ships' quantum signatures to strengthen their defenses. He hesitated, mandibles clicking in what human xenologists identified as profound embarrassment. We need different thinking. Chen's comm unit chirped once. She tapped it, listening to Earth Strategic Command's response to her coded alert. The transmission lasted precisely 12 seconds. When she looked up, her expression had changed subtly. Those who knew her well would have recognized the slight curve of her lips as satisfaction. The Resilience Fleet will deploy within 18 hours, she announced, tapping commands into the table's interface. The holographic display shifted to show orbital images of Earth's Lagrange shipyards, where vessels were already being moved from long-term storage into activation docks. The assembled alien diplomats leaned forward collectively, then recoiled in confusion. The ships on display were visibly outdated, angular hulls bearing scorch marks and mismatched armor plates, visible ballistic turrets, and exhaust ports that occasionally belched flames from chemical propulsion systems. There must be some mistake. The Quarren ambassador's translator vibrated. These are historical vessels. These are warships, Chen corrected, zooming in on the largest vessel, a 2-kilometer behemoth whose hull bore the name Invictus in faded lettering. Ships we were about to decommission after centuries of service. Thalos's translator glitched as his mandibles clicked in what humans recognized as a combination of disbelief and outrage. You send museum relics against our apocalypse. Chen's smile broadened fractionally, her eyes reflecting the red warning lights of the holographic display. No, she said softly. We're sending your salvation. 12 hours later, the alien delegation crowded the observation deck as the Resilience fleet emerged from Earth's shadow. The vessels looked even more battered up close. Hulls patched with mismatched armor plates, exhaust vents occasionally belching chemical flames, and weapon systems that belonged in historical archives rather than active combat. This is beyond insulting, hissed the Meridian delegate, his epidermis flashing patterns of indignation. We've lost 3 technologically superior fleets, and the humans send scrap metal. Admiral Chen stood silently beside High Counselor Thalos, watching as 40 vessels of varying sizes assembled in formation. The flagship Invictus dwarfed the others, its kilometer-long frame bearing scorch marks that had been deliberately preserved rather than repaired. The markings on the port side, Chen explained, noting Thalos's compound eyes focusing on the damaged hull section. Captain Reeves insisted they remain untouched after the Proxima rebellion. She says they remind the crew that overconfidence is fatal. The main view screen activated, displaying the weathered face of Captain Diana Reeves. Her hair was streaked with silver, her left cheek bearing a lattice of scars that had resisted regenerative treatments. The captain's left eye had been replaced with a mechanical implant that whirred audibly as it focused, not the sleek neural interfaces of Concord officers, but something unabashedly mechanical. High Counselor Thalos. Reeves's voice rasped through speakers that crackled with analog static. I understand your reservations about our fleet. Several alien delegates exchanged glances. The human wasn't even using quantum communication protocols but radio waves, technology the Concord had abandoned centuries ago. Captain, Thalos began carefully, the Scourge has destroyed our most advanced vessels. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding about the threat level. There's no misunderstanding, Reeves interrupted, her mechanical eye narrowing. My first command was a patrol boat with composite decking and hydrogen fusion engines. The Invictus may not look impressive, but neither did the mining vessels that defeated the corporate armada at Titan. The reference meant nothing to the aliens, but Chen noticed several human officers nodding in recognition. Reeves continued, We'll rendezvous with your remaining forces at Antares in 96 hours. Have your commanders prepare to integrate their vessels into our tactical formations. The Quarren ambassador's crystalline form vibrated with disbelief. You expect our advanced warships to follow your tactical direction. Reeves's weathered face remained impassive. Yes, because unlike your advanced warships, we're still here. The transmission ended abruptly before the aliens could voice their outrage. An alarm sounded as the Resilience fleet engaged their main engines, chemical rockets flaring with actual visible flame, accelerating the vessels at a fraction of what conquered ships could achieve. This is madness, muttered a Meridian diplomat. They won't even reach the conflict zone before we've lost another system. Chen's communication unit chimed softly. She glanced at it, then addressed the assembled diplomats. Fleet Admiral Washington invites you to observe fleet deployment from Earth Strategic Command. Transport leaves in 15 minutes. As the diplomats filed out, Thalos lingered behind. Admiral Chen, my species has studied human history extensively. Your people are not fools. What strategy underlies this apparent insanity? Chen's expression remained neutral, but her eyes reflected the starlight as the last of the human vessels disappeared into the darkness of space. The Scourge hunts by sensing energy signatures and quantum communication networks, correct? She asked. Yes, Fellows confirmed. They can detect and target our advanced systems from half a light year away. Then consider, Chen said softly, what happens when you send ships they cannot see, using weapons they cannot predict, commanded by officers whose tactics they cannot anticipate. For the first time since his arrival, Thalas's mandibles clicked in what human xenolinguists classified as tentative hope. Perhaps, Chen concluded, watching the stars where the fleet had vanished, obsolescence has its advantages. Old ways, new tricks. This is intentional obsolescence, Dr. Kazuo Nakamura declared, tapping a holographic display in the Invictus's briefing room. His enthusiasm contrasted sharply with the veteran crew around him, the young scientist's eyes bright with intellectual excitement, while the officers' faces remained carved from experience. The alien liaison officers shifted uncomfortably on seats designed for human anatomy. High Counselor Thalas's exoskeleton creaked as he leaned forward to study battle footage, showing scourge vessels instantly locking onto Concorde ships' energy signatures. Your technology is too perfect, Nakamura continued, splitting open what appeared to be an ancient radio transmitter. You've optimized yourselves into a corner. The scourge hunts quantum communication like predators sensing electrical impulses in water. Lieutenant Shirazi, a tactical officer with augmented sensory implants, leaned forward. You're suggesting our advancement is our weakness. Precisely, Captain Reeves confirmed, entering with a physical map, actual paper, that she unfurled across the table. The alien officers recoiled slightly at the primitive medium. The Resilience fleet uses hardwired systems, analog targeting, and communication methods the Scourge perceives as background noise. She demonstrated by activating a small device that produced a harsh squeal. The alien officers winced at the primitive sound. That's Morse code, dots and dashes, Reeves explained. To your quantum receivers, it's barbaric interference. To the Scourge, it's invisible. Dr. Nakamura highlighted sections of Scourge vessels on the display. They've evolved to consume energy signatures from civilizations following predictable technological development paths. Your species developed quantum tech, then abandoned all predecessor systems. He smiled. We've kept everything. In the weapons bay 3 decks below, Chief Armorer Rodriguez supervised as human technicians worked alongside bewildered alien engineers, mounting crystalline energy focusers salvaged from damaged Concorde ships onto modified ballistic delivery systems. This shouldn't work, protested a Valoran weapons expert, her sensory appendages recoiling from the seemingly crude integration. You're mounting a 5th-generation phase disruptor onto a chemical propellant system. Gunnery Sergeant Ortiz grinned, her scarred face illuminated by welding sparks. That's exactly why it will work. The Scourge scanned for weapon signatures they recognize. This hybrid abomination isn't in their database. She hefted what appeared to be a primitive missile, its nose cone now housing a Concorde phase disruptor. In human military history, we call this asymmetric warfare. When you can't match an enemy's strength, you change the battlefield. Back in the briefing room, Reeves traced a route through the Antares system on her paper map. We'll enter the system powered down to minimal levels, using gravitational assist to maintain momentum. No engines, no active scanning, no quantum communications. You'll be effectively blind, Fellows objected. Reeves tapped her mechanical eye. We'll use visual confirmation and thermal imaging, passive systems that don't emit detectable signals. Dr. Nakamura added, your ships broadcast their presence across 11 dimensions. Ours will be ghosts. A young communications officer entered the briefing room, handing Reeves a slip of paper. The captain read it, her expression remaining neutral. Scourge forces have breached the secondary defense line at Helios Gate, she announced. We have 48 hours until they reach Antares. The alien officers exchanged worried glances, but Reeves simply folded her map with deliberate precision. Enough theory, she said. Lieutenant, prepare for combat. Dr. Nakamura, brief our guests on Operation Shadowstep. Lieutenant Shirazi, I want you to work with gunnery to integrate CID targeting algorithms with our ballistic systems. As the briefing room emptied, Thalos remained, watching Reeves's measured movements. Captain, he ventured, this approach contradicts everything the Concord knows about technological evolution. How did humanity arrive at such a divergent philosophy? Reeves's mechanical eye whirred as it focused on the High Counselor. Because we remember our history, Counselor. And our history taught us that sometimes the most advanced weapon is the one your enemy has forgotten how to fight. The mining colony of Antares hung in space like a partially devoured fruit. Scourge vessels, crystalline structures pulsing with stolen energy, methodically stripped the system's outer planets, while smaller drone units swarmed around a central nexus. Aboard the Invictus, the bridge was dark except for red emergency lighting. Heat built as life support operated at minimal levels. Captain Reeves's face glistened with sweat as she studied a physical periscope, an actual tube with mirrors extending through the hull. Maintain drift trajectory, she ordered quietly. Gravitational slingshot around the third moon in 5 minutes. The Resilience fleet, powered down to emit less energy than ambient space debris, slid through the system like shadows. 3 Scourge harvesters passed within kilometers of the human vessels without registering their presence. Lieutenant Shirazi monitored a glass gauge filled with actual mercury. Internal temperature approaching human tolerance limits. Captain. Just a little longer, Reeves murmured, watching as the fleet achieved optimal firing positions around the unsuspecting enemy. High Counselor Thalos shifted uncomfortably in his environment suit, the heat particularly uncomfortable for his exoskeletal biology. He had insisted on joining the Invictus's bridge crew, claiming diplomatic necessity, but Reeves recognized curiosity when she saw it, regardless of species. How can your crew function in these conditions? The alien whispered. Discomfort is temporary, defeat is permanent, Reeves replied, a saying so old among her crew that it elicited small smiles despite their situation. At her signal, engineering crews manually activated firing mechanisms, not with digital commands but with physical switches and levers. Gun ports that appeared decorative on the aged vessels slid open to reveal muzzles of massive railguns. Match bearings and shoot on my mark, Reeves ordered through a speaking tube. Across the fleet, gunners adjusted brass sights and calculated trajectories with analog computers. Fire. The vacuum of space hid the sound, but the vibration shuddered through every human vessel as magnetically accelerated tungsten rods streaked toward the Scourge ships. The first impacts were catastrophic. The rods moving at relativistic speeds punched through energy shields calibrated to disperse directed energy weapons. Through her periscope, Reeves watched as 3 crystalline harvesters shattered simultaneously, their fragments spiraling into beautiful deadly clouds. For 7 seconds, there was no response. Then the Scourge swarm erupted in chaotic motion, suddenly aware of predators in their midst. They're scanning, reported Lieutenant Shirazi, monitoring passive sensors. Energy emissions increasing across all bands, but they can't pinpoint us. They're looking for power signatures we're not emitting, Reeves observed. All vessels maintain silent running. On the auxiliary bridge, Commander Ortega guided High Counselor Thalos to an observation port. The alien's compound eyes reflected the distant explosions. How? He managed to ask. Ortega gave a predatory smile. Sometimes the old ways are best. They've never been punched in the face before. The Scourge swarm moved with increasing agitation, hunter-killer units splitting off to sweep the system in expanding search patterns, while the main force clustered defensively around their command nexus. They can't see us, but they know we're here, Reeves noted. Phase 2. All vessels rotating firing solutions, pattern echo. The Resilience fleet began to move, using minimum thrust to adjust positions while maintaining low emissions. The next volley came from completely different vectors, creating the illusion of a much larger attacking force. 6 more Scourge vessels ruptured under the assault. This time, the response was immediate. The swarm began firing blindly in all directions, energy beams slicing through empty space. They're desperate, Reeves observed with grim satisfaction. And wasting energy. Continue evasive patterns. Prepare hybrid warheads for deployment. She turned to find Thelos staring at her, the alien's posture conveying something between shock and revelation. "You've fought blind enemies before," Thelos said. Not a question, but a realization. Reeves's mechanical eye whirred softly as she adjusted her view back to the periscope. "Humanity has fought every kind of enemy, counselor, including ourselves. That's why we never forgot how to fight the old ways." She paused, watching a scourge vessel disintegrate under another barrage. Because sometimes the future brings back the past. Evasive pattern delta. Reeves barked as the scourge swarm reorganized, thousands of smaller units breaking from larger clusters to form a hunting mesh. The Invictus groaned under sudden acceleration, metal bulkheads creaking as the aged vessel pushed beyond safety parameters. In engineering, Chief Lakshmi bypassed cooling systems, rerouting power to engines. "Giving you everything she's got, Captain. Any more and we'll melt the core." The small corvette, Swift Retribution, wasn't fast enough. Scourge drones enveloped the vessel like piranha, boring through its hull with energy drills that sought vital systems. Lieutenant Chen's final transmission cut through the radio chatter. "They're taking the ship intact. Initiating protocol sundown." The signal terminated abruptly. Reeves's artificial eye narrowed as she processed this development. "They're learning. Lieutenant Shirazi, deploy Operation Chaff and Hammer." Now, the destroyer Thunderchild led a squadron of smaller vessels in a maneuver that appeared suicidal, accelerating directly toward the densest concentration of enemy units. As they closed, cargo bays opened to release millions of metal fragments, each inscribed with fractal patterns designed to scatter sensor readings. "Deploying mines," Shirazi announced, her fingers dancing across mechanical switches. Spherical devices tumbled into space, their surfaces deliberately scratched and pitted to appear as debris. The electromagnetic pulse hit without warning, not a sophisticated targeted attack, but a crude wave of disruption that rippled through space from modified human power cores. Quantum communications among the scourge swarm stuttered and fragmented. Thalos, watching tactical displays from the auxiliary bridge, witnessed something extraordinary. The seemingly outmatched human ships diving into the momentarily confused enemy formation, deploying what should be suicide tactics. "The mines are proximity-triggered," explained Communications Officer Ramirez beside him. "Old-school magnetism and pressure plates. No signals to detect." The explosions blossomed silently across space as mines attached to scourge vessels before detonating with devastating force. For a moment, it seemed the humans had gained the upper hand, until tactical displays showed the captured Swift Retribution being systematically disassembled by the enemy. "They're accessing our tactical database," Reeves realized. "All vessels switch to contingency frequencies and prepare for Phase 3. They're about to know how we think." The Scourge response was immediate and terrifying. A coordinated energy burst swept through the battlefield, perfectly calibrated to the frequency of human ballistic shields. 3 smaller vessels, the corvettes Paragon and Harrier, and the destroyer Vigilant, lost power simultaneously, their hulls rupturing as internal systems overloaded. "They've analyzed Chen's ship," Dr. Nakamura reported from the science station. "They're already adapting countermeasures specific to our technology." Reeves's expression remained impassive, but her organic eye showed a flash of genuine concern. "All vessels implement protocol shifting sands. Random frequency changes every 90 seconds. The remaining human vessels began evasive maneuvers, but the Scourge were now tracking them with increasing accuracy. Energy beams that had previously fired blindly now converged on actual targets. A direct hit rocked the Invictus, sending crew members sprawling. "Hull breach, Deck 4, reported damage control. Emergency bulkheads engage. They're predicting our moves," Lieutenant Shirazi observed, her fingers dancing across manual controls. calculating our trajectories based on observed maneuvers. Reeves studied the tactical display, watching as the Scourge vessels formed new attack patterns specifically designed to counter human evasive maneuvers. Her hand moved to a sealed console beside her command chair. "So they think they know us now," she said quietly. She inserted a physical key into the console's lock. "Let's show them how wrong they are." All vessels authenticate contingency Lazarus. Throughout the fleet, officers removed similar keys from secure containers, unlocking hidden systems that had remained completely dormant until now. "What is happening?" Thelos demanded as sections of the Invictus's outer hull began to reconfigure, panels sliding away to reveal previously concealed weapon systems. Reeves's weathered face showed the first genuine smile since the battle began. "We're about to change the rules, Counselor. Sometimes the best surprise isn't your first trick, it's your second." The Invictus shuddered as another direct hit penetrated its armor. On the bridge, damage control teams battled electrical fires with handheld extinguishers, while medics treated wounded crew members. "They've adapted to our ballistics," reported Lieutenant Shirazi, forming kinetic dispersion fields calibrated to our projectile velocities. Reeves studied the tactical display, blood trickling from a cut above her organic eye. "They're predicting our moves now. Time to show them our real teeth." Throughout the fleet, officers unlocked hidden compartments with physical keys. Radiation shielding retracted from previously dormant systems that had been completely isolated from all networks until this moment. Dr. Nakamura's voice came through the communication system. "What you're seeing is intentional technological segregation. These ships contain cutting-edge systems that have never been powered up or connected to any network. The Scourge couldn't detect what was never active." Deep within the Invictus, technicians removed the final radiation shielding from a core unlike anything the Concorde had seen, a temporal distortion generator creating microscopic bubbles of altered spacitime. The effect was immediate and disorienting. Scourge targeting systems that relied on predictive algorithms suddenly found their targets arriving microseconds before or after calculations suggested, causing their attacks to miss by crucial margins. "They're firing at where we should be, not where we are," Shirazi observed with grim satisfaction. In the science lab, Dr. Nakamura finalized his analysis of captured Scourge communication patterns. "Their collective intelligence uses quantum entanglement to maintain unity across vast distances. I've identified vulnerability patterns we can exploit, introducing cascade errors that should propagate throughout their network." He activated a specialized transmitter, broadcasting precisely modulated quantum signals designed to mimic Scourge communication, but carrying subtle corruptions that would spread through their network. The effect was dramatic. Across the battlefield, Scourge formations became increasingly erratic, units contradicting each other's movements and occasionally firing on ally vessels. "It's working," Thelos marveled. "You're making them fight themselves." "The oldest trick in psychological warfare," Reeves replied. "Create confusion and mistrust." Chief Engineer Lakshmi's voice came over the intercom, strained but controlled. "Captain, the temporal containment system is deteriorating. We're looking at 20 minutes, maybe less, before catastrophic failure." Reeves's expression hardened. "How long until Nakamura's virus fully propagates through their network?" 32 minutes at current rates, came the scientist's response. "Unacceptable," Reeves decided. "We need to accelerate transmission directly to their nexus." She studied the tactical display, calculating. "All vessels form Thermopylae Gambit. We're going to create a corridor." The human fleet vessels began a precisely coordinated maneuver, forming a geometric pattern that created a narrow channel through the enemy forces, a direct path to the Scourge command nexus. "The temporal distortion is failing," Dr. Nakamura reported as warning lights bathed the science lab in crimson. "System integrity at 28%. Reeves transferred command codes to her executive officer. "The Invictus will hold the formation. I'm taking command of the Indefatigable." When her officers began to protest, Reeves silenced them with a raised hand. "The carrier structure is already compromised, but its delivery systems are intact. It's the logical choice. Fellows followed Reeves to the shuttle bay. "This is a suicide mission," he stated, not a question. Reeves checked the ammunition on an antique sidearm before holstering it. "Probably, but sometimes victory requires sacrifice." "Why you personally?" the alien asked. "Surely a subordinate." "I don't ask my people to take risks I won't take myself," Reeves interrupted. "That's not how humanity leads." The shuttle doors closed on the captain's weathered face, her mechanical eye glinting with determination. As the small craft departed for the damaged carrier, Fellows realized he was witnessing something his species had forgotten over centuries of technological advancement: the power of personal example. With 16 minutes remaining, the Legacy fleet maintained its precise geometric formation, the Thermopylae gambit creating a narrow corridor through enemy forces. Aboard the heavily damaged carrier Indefatigable, Captain Reeves found a skeleton crew of volunteers already preparing for what they all understood was likely a one-way mission. And in that moment, as human ingenuity faced the overwhelming technological might of the Scourge, the tide of the war began to turn.